They are an elite fighting force, legendary around the world. They are the Navy SEALs. And today we are going to talk to a former Navy SEAL who's going to share with us the life lessons and leadership lessons that he gained. Stay tuned.
Everyone, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Catholic Gentleman. We're grateful that you are here. I want to take a moment and thank our sponsor for this episode, the Saintmaker. We'll talk about that later in this episode. Also, if you don't know who we are, we're the Catholic Gentleman. We're your co-hosts, Sam Guzman and John Heinen. We're blessed to be here. Uniquely, I get to speak to two Sams today, so I'm pretty excited about that. One of them, my friend and co-host, and the other one is this former Navy SEAL officer. So if this is your first time listening to us, please remember to subscribe, follow us on all these different podcast players or YouTube. If you have listened to us a few times, you're inspired, we'd be grateful for all donations and all supports. We want to thank all of our current sponsors. If you are not a current sponsor, head over to patreon.com/CatholicGentleman. Take a look at some of the tiers that we have to offer. You're in our prayers, and we'd appreciate it if you kept us in your prayers.
Yeah, and if you're watching on video on YouTube, you may notice that John and I are in the same room, even though we're doing a Zoom interview. John's visiting me here in Oklahoma, and we're strategizing ways to continue the work of Catholic Gentlemen and expand that. And so it's very exciting for us to be together. But that's why we're in the same room if you're watching on YouTube. So anyway, but without further ado, let's get to know our guest and take it away, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sam Blair is a former Navy SEAL officer. He also holds degrees from Cornell University, MBA. He has an executive certificate from MIT. He has trained over 90 new future SEAL officers, and he's traveled all over the world, been deployed in Africa, Middle East, and South America. So what really excites us is that not only is he a former Navy SEAL, he's a former Navy SEAL officer that has been training. He's a devout Catholic man. He's a father, married, obviously, lives in Louisiana, and we're so excited that he would join us today. So Sam, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, John, Sam, pleasure. And, for what it's worth, hopefully we can also be friends, John. I know you're friends with Sam Guzman, but at the end of this, maybe we can also spark a friendship as well.
Sam squared. No, I like it.
Perfect, yeah. Well, I'm doing wonderful. Again, thank you so much for hosting, and thanks for that kind introduction. I'm blushing. So pumped to be here.
Absolutely. So Sam, what we like to do is we like to start and talk about you. And I know you went to Franciscan University, which I didn't mention early on. So you've been a Catholic. Have you been a Catholic your whole life, or was it a conversion that you had and you decided to go to a Catholic university? We'd love to start there and just hear from you.
Yeah. So cradle Catholic. I'm the oldest of four. My parents, wonderful. My dad was a cradle Catholic. My mother actually converted the year before I was born. I think 2 years into marriage, had a conversion, and a lot of that had to do with my dad's faithfulness. I think just showing up, being patient with her questions, and just continuing to be consistent. And honestly, I think the reason I'm still a Catholic today is because of my dad, just his consistency and faith. And as a guy, I think seeing my dad, hey, we're going to Sunday Mass, was a lot different, I think, than some of my friends who are like, yeah, I'm not Catholic anymore. And you kind of peel that onion back, oftentimes just the mother leading the charge, So I really credit faith to my parents, but in a big way, a big shout out to my dad.
Oh, how wonderful. And so why Catholic University? What was your hopes when you decided to go to college? Was it to eventually join the Navy? Navy's real close to my heart. I just want to say thanks for your service. And my grandfather, who I've mentioned on this episode many times as one of my ideal archetypes of a man, was in the Navy for many years and served in the Navy. So
my father's actually in the Navy as well.
Praise God. Yeah.
Right on. This is great. Good company, right? Yeah. So kind of like you gentlemen, I grew up in a military family. So my grandfather was a naval officer, and then my dad went to the Naval Academy, was a Marine pilot before getting out, becoming an airline pilot. And we moved around a bunch as a kid, but one of the spots we ended up, planting the flag as a family. My folks and my siblings are actually still out in San Diego, which is a military town. So grew up, seeing lots of Navy jets fly over, Navy helicopters, Coronados where the SEALs train. So at a young age, I was exposed to all that. Not to mention, having a grandfather and your father having served, there's kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit. You're like, oh, wow, this is not only doable, but these are guys I respect. I want to do this. So it was definitely in the forefront of my brain early on. As far as Franciscan, I'd never heard of the place. My mother actually sent me to a conference when I was going into my freshman year in high school. She was probably concerned about me with good reason. She's like, we got to get this guy on the straight and narrow. So she forced me into this conference. I knew nobody. I was like one of 3 people from our parish. 2 of the other individuals were females that I, didn't necessarily associate with at that age. So literally by myself in this road trip, University of Arizona. And up until that point, my faith journey was I go to Sunday mass because I don't want my parents mad, and then I'll get my donut, call it a day, and the rest of Sunday's mine. At that conference, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is real. This whole faith thing is real. Jesus is real. He loves me. Okay, check. And that demands a response. And so that was a huge calibration shift going into high school. And I'll get into that more maybe later, but ultimately when it came time to make a decision for colleges, Franciscan came on the radar because I thought, it's going to be like this big conference for 4 years. Not the case. So I left sunny San Diego for, gloomy Steubenville, Ohio, and honestly loved it. So also changed my life in a lot of ways. And it was at Franciscan that I was pretty serious about. I think most guys, if they're serious about their faith, will ask the question, like, maybe I'm called to be a priest, maybe I'll look into that. So I did. I was open to that maybe for the first couple of years while I was at Franciscan. And then my senior year, my wife had transferred from Auburn University up to Franciscan, her senior year, my senior year. And I did a 180. I was like, I am going to marry that lady. Yeah. And it didn't work out quite that well, but we ended up getting together years later, which is a story in itself. But yeah, Franciscan was awesome. Loved it. Lifelong friends, and can't say enough good things about the university. Definitely formative.
Cool. Yeah. So when did you? I'm curious. If I was first feel that spark of like I might want to join the Navy and like take that next step. Yeah.
So for me, it was, I remember like being 7 years old, visiting my grandparents in Coronado, California. And there's a lot of memorabilia at the, in the town with different shops. One of them in particular is a company called Bullshirt, and they sell shirts about San Diego for tourists. And then half the stores all focus on Navy SEALs. Mm-hmm. And they've got these cool pictures and posters. And I remember asking my grandfather, I was like, what is that? There's guys jumping on planes and helicopters and scuba diving. I was like, wow. And he's like, those are Navy SEALs. And I remember just being totally hooked. I was like, I want to do that. And I don't think that left me. In fact, it didn't leave me. When I was a junior in college, I started really thinking about, okay, I'm not going to be a priest per se. What am I supposed to do? And this is kind of, I guess, wild because it was an interesting experience, a personal one. But I remember maybe I was being a little bit dramatic. I don't know. I went to this grotto that Franciscan has, dedicated to Our Lady of Lourdes. So it's tucked away on the campus, and a statue of Our Lady. And I remember going out there at night. I was like, what am I supposed to do in life? Like, what do you want me to do? And I did one of these like pondering things, put my fist on my chin and just kind of lost in my own thoughts. And I looked down and there was this special forces figure that maybe some kid, had left, but literally at my feet. And I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting. And I held on to that thing. My boys, I have 2 boys and a little girl. My boys were, can I have that? Dad's like, no, that's my special toy. But that was definitely something that kind of, again, we reawoken that childhood desire. And I would say leaving college is when it really kicked into gear, Sam. I did a stint with some friends in Ethiopia, in Africa, working with Missionaries of Charity. And he got these 4 nuns working with like 100 kids in this little orphanage called Bali, Africa, the eastern part of Ethiopia. And a lot of these kids had been mutilated, intentionally blinded with acid. And my understanding is they were put on the streets of the capital, Addis Ababa, to beg. People would take them in at night, take their money, put them, give them some food, put them back on the streets. This vicious cycle, and some good Samaritans got them out of that cycle. And I remember trying to process this as a young guy, like, whoa, time out. People did what to these kids? And I think at that stage, there was this element where I wanted to do something more, something bigger than myself. And we had, as a country, were also involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, and not to like weigh in on thoughts there, but there was definitely a pride as a country, and I wanted to get involved. And a lot of that was just in my early 20s, and I thought, wow, who's the best trained, best equipped? And that for me was the SEALs. I was like, if I'm going to do it at all, I want to go and do it with the best. And threw my hat in the ring for officer candidate school, and was accepted a year later. And 2008 showed up to Basic Underwater Demolition School, known as BUDS, and 2-year process of training and selection began. And then spent over a decade in the teams, doing all sorts of fun stuff with some great people, and it was awesome. So it's kind of a catalyst there.
Yeah, it's really great. So that I understand, basically you had some signal graces, it sounds like, and then you joined the Navy with the intent to become, or to join the SEAL. It wasn't you joined the Navy, and then while you were there, you discerned, hey, maybe I throw my ring, my name in the hat to become a SEAL. But it was really with that intent from the beginning. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. And what I love about, hopefully the Navy's still doing this, but there's a great optionality there, saying like, hey, list the 3 things that you want to do if you get selected officer candidate school. And I just put Navy SEAL, Navy SEAL, Navy SEAL. And so I think the intention is like, hey, if you want to be a pilot and that doesn't work out, do you want to be a submariner? If that doesn't work out, do you want to be a ship driver? And for me, I just put 1, 2, 3 SEAL. And if that doesn't work out, lose my number, kind of thing. So,
yeah. So obviously there's a lot of guys that kind of feel that desire. Like, I want to be the best of the best. Like, I want to, and they go to they sign up, but then they, for whatever reason, I mean, they just can't get there. And so I wonder if there was like any moments for you where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to like pass the tests that are required of me. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So I actually, to get selected there's 3 pathways. There's the Naval Academy. They get like a third of the, let's say every year, the Navy's producing, 50 officer candidates. Let's do it 60 just to round it out. They're going to get a third. You're going to get, let's do 90. They'll get 30, reserve officer training course or ROTC. So the different universities, the big ones, have these ROTC opportunities. They'll get a third. So they'll send 30 candidates, and then officer candidate school would get 30. So to get that look, I was competing with all the other individuals that didn't have an ROTC program. So it was a significant pool. And so there's an academic process to it. There's basically a physical component, like you have to be competitive physically in your what they call a package. So it's like this holistic look. And then you have to know someone that's going to vouch for you and like, hey, I am a Navy SEAL officer, and I think this guy would be a good SEAL officer based on what I know about the community. So if all of those line up, you get a shot to go to officer candidate school. And then of those candidates, you know, they might graduate 2 years later, a handful of SEAL officers. Usually the officers have a better chance of coming out of the pipeline just based on the screen that goes in the front end. It's pretty selective. But for me, you know, to answer your question, Sam, I was just hyper focused on getting a slot. Like I was like, if you just get me a slot, and I don't know who I was referring to when I say you, but if I get a slot, you know, I was pretty confident like I was going to get through it. That was maybe being cocky. I showed up and definitely had some rough awakenings. Like, whoa, this is like wrestling a saber-toothed tiger. You know, like there was some like rough days for sure. But honestly, Sam, the roughest part for me, and maybe the listeners think this would be funny. But I overlooked officer candidate school completely. I was like, oh, this is just kind of like a formality because it's truncated. It's like 4 months. And I was just blown away by the level of detail of like, I definitely got to a point that I was like, man, I got to make it out of officer candidate school first before I even get to buds. I got wrecked at officer candidate school. I just cracking too many jokes, wasn't serious, didn't take it seriously. I was like, oh yeah, this is just minutia, always behind the power curve. So it took me a hot minute. You guys have time for a story?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Please share. Yeah, we're enjoying.
So second day of officer candidate school, I show up late. So I show up, everyone else is in a uniform except me. I've got longer hair than I do now because I was a beach lifeguard while I was putting in my application. And I'm wearing like a bright colored Ralph Lauren shirt. So like everyone's like, who's this guy? You know, long hair, bright shirt. You don't want to stand out. So I already stood out. And I was the only guy in my class that had a contract to go to Buds. So I was like, ooh, I wonder how many push-ups this guy can do. I was like, stop talking to me, you know? So I was getting cornered immediately for like 2 days. And then on the second day is when you get introduced to your Marine drill instructor. So the Navy cut a deal back in World War II where they were short of instructors and the Marine Corps was short of like mechanics for their aircraft. So there was like a swap. And it was like, hey, we'll send you a bunch of mechanics. Can you send us the drill instructors? And so that arrangement's still in place today. So Marine drill instructor shows up to Rhode Island. And day one, we like march into the chow hall. And there's supposed to be like 2 lines. There's like the inside line, the outside line. I was the number one guy on the outside line. And then the person to my left on the inside line was a female who was going supply officer. So the goal was she was going to turn left. She was going to just march in place. And then 6 steps, we're going to turn together. This is a ridiculous story, but this is my introduction to the Navy. So I'm the outside guy. I make a turn. She apparently didn't turn tight enough. So the drill instructor's sitting there like, no, take it back. So we reset. We do it again. We fail again, take it back. So this happens like 3 times. And on the 3rd time, I'm walking back to the line and I like do one of these. So the drill instructor like, this lady, you know, and I roll my eyes and like point at her, like, get her out, you know, she's holding us all back. And he lost his mind. Like there's hundreds of people in this chow hall. And day one, meeting this guy, he's like, are you rolling your eyes in my chow hall? And I was like, well, an officer doesn't lie, steal, or cheat. And I was like, I got to tell him the truth. I was rolling my eyes. He's like, get out. It's like, you like, get out, get outside. It's like, okay. So I walk outside. I'm in like a khaki uniform that's super tight. And it's Rhode Island in the winter, January, snowing. And I have like short sleeve khaki uniform, khaki pants, which is somewhat formal attire. and he has me step outside into the snow, start doing jumping jacks. Like, I got to get this guy on my back. So I'm just yelling, thinking he loves intensity. He's like, shut up. I'm like, okay. He's like, roll. I was like, roll? He's like, roll. So he had me do a somersault down this hill into this icy water. So I'm like, in this icy water, he's like, push-ups. I'm like, just yelling, yes, sir. He's like, shut up. He's like, sit up. So I'm doing sit-ups in this icy water. And this is like day 2 of Oscar candidate school. So I'm like, gosh, I totally underestimated this place. And he's telling me, shut up. But I want him to know I heard him, So I'm like, have my mouth closed, but I'm saying, like humming or trying to let him know, like I am acknowledging. And he's losing his mind. He's like, I told you to shut up. Are you an idiot? And I was like, I want you to know I'm not an idiot. So I was like, no, sir. I said, I told you to shut up. So it's like this back and forth. Finally, he's like, get back in the chow hall. And it was one of those moments in life where the music just stops. I like open up the door and like hundreds of heads just like look at me. Music stopped and I'm again isolated. I'm like, dude, this is not how I wanted to start my Navy career. And I think at that moment, I was like, I got to get it together or like these childhood dreams are done.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was day 1 with the drill instructor, day 2 of my naval career. And yeah, there's lots of fits and starts in officer candidate school, but that was the beginning of my career. So I was like, I gotta buckle up or I'm not even gonna make it to buds.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
It really is. My goodness. So when you were, have you always been, I guess, a physically fit guy, or was that something that you had to really work on? That's where my mind immediately went. Cause I know I've done Mark Lauren's You Are Your Own Gym for many weeks. And, he talks about basically it's that the mental exhaustion and the physical exhaustion, or the ability just not to be able to maintain that level of stamina. Was that ever an issue for you, or does that resonate with you? Did you see a lot of guys drop out, weren't able to make it because of those things? What, in your opinion, was the biggest difficulty that you had to overcome?
Yeah. So fitness was big growing up. My mom was actually my PE coach growing up, and she was big into swimming. My dad, like I said, he was a Marine. He's a freaking athlete in his own right and a stud. But my mom is really something special. She's been part of relay leg, swimming the English Channel. She's done triathlons. She's climbed Mount Whitney. Like she really pushed physical fitness in kind of her own way. I was like, wow, this is attractive. Like she's just always outgoing and I think it's just part of being a holistic person, like mental, physical, spiritual, social aspect. And she and my dad both were big advocates on, fitness. So that was just kind of part of growing up. We lived in a small house in Coronado, and my folks were like, look, you're not going to stay inside, like get out. So I was constantly, riding my bike or going to practice for swimming, or my parents always had me in sports, or I was in the ocean, swimming, surfing. That was all part of childhood. So I was very comfortable in the water, which is a huge component of Naval Special Warfare that's different than the other special operations communities, Rangers, Green Berets, because of the water element. And so I felt like I had a leg up in the sense that, one, I grew up in and around the training environment, kind of had an idea of what to expect. And then 2, playing water polo, our coach, a guy named Randy Burgess, had a track record that anyone that played for his program for all 4 years, there was like 100% success rate for those individuals that went to buds. So that was actually really wild. Someone needs to study Randy Burgess because he's got something going on over there with his program. But a lot of my buddies from my high school water polo team, were SEALs, which is really cool. So you like childhood friends serving in this capacity later in life, still teammates, really special.
Oh, that is really cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to shift a little bit. And there's So there was this mystique for you growing up, just being around the culture and like growing up in the area where, SEALs are based but I would also see like this bigger cultural fascination with the SEALs where, like just like I remember in high school watching documentaries on Discovery Channel about like Hell Week and just this cultural fascination with this elite fighting force. And so I guess just having been through that, but also having felt that attraction yourself, like, what do you think it is that captures the public imagination about the SEALs? Does it resonate with kind of what you experienced?
Yeah, I love that question, Sam. And I think there's, on a human level, I think most individuals, this is a generalization, are attracted to things that are hard, to things that there's a standard, there's accountability. And I don't at all want to make a connection that, between saints and SEALs. But for me, hearing John Paul II, St. John Paul II, talk about sanctity, talk about the call to holiness. I mean, there's a reason a generation got super excited about that pursuit, is because it's like, hey, you were meant to be great. Like you're not meant to be comfortable. You're meant to pursue greatness. There's something that awakens a feminine and a masculine part when you start talking about standards, hardship, accountability. And I think the SEALs have all three. And in a time and a place in history where everyone gets a trophy, everyone's a winner, everyone's great, the SEALs they don't shy away from calling people out. They don't shy away from saying, hey, you're not meeting the standard. And there's something attractive about that. Like, hey, here's the line. And that's like, if you want to play, there it is. Like, we're not. And right now, I mean, they're open up to men, women. They're like, hey, here's the standard. We care about lethality. We care about being a good teammate. And here's the physical, limits. And if you can meet that, great. Welcome to the club. If not, go take a hike. And I love that. They're just hard and fast. And that there's something maybe that lends to the mystique with those elements. But let me pause. I don't know if that's answering the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. I think as much as our culture like simultaneously disdains standards and responsibility and measuring up, at the same time, like it's just a human need that is being addressed there. Like, while there's cultural forces working against that desire remains. Like, I think especially for young men too, where it's like a young man has to feel like he's like, maybe my dad loves me and I know that, but I still need to like prove myself to him that I can meet the standard, and like he's pushing me. Like I want to prove, like, not in the sense of like earning love, but in the sense of like putting into practice and meeting the standards that he's kind of set for you. Like a good father doesn't just let their kid just atrophy and just like, sink to the lowest denominator. I mean, there's a sense of loving. We're going to push you because I believe that you have what it takes. And I know you're capable of more. And so I'm going to hold you to the standard of what I know you're capable of. And I feel like that we long for that in our culture, especially just, like young men just haven't been challenged. They haven't been pushed. They haven't had someone, say, you're not doing what I know you're capable of. Like, and I know I kind of had that experience in high school with my coaching, like my coach was like, he like had it out for me. It felt like, but it was because he knew I was capable of more. And that was a beautiful thing, actually. And when I did rise to that standard, it felt so good. And I think the Navy SEALs are one of those last bastions of like, this is the standard, take it or leave it, but we're going to hold you to it. We're not going to compromise that.
I love that. And I think that carries over, whether it's academics, music, sports, any profession that takes themselves seriously is going to have those standards and that accountability. But I think on that same level, kind of shifting away from mystique and just kind of going more at like the vocation itself. There were guys that showed up, and I'd say 90% of them physically capable of making it through buds. But ultimately, you have to want to be there, because the whole program will sift out. If you're there because you want to prove yourself to family members or friends, look, I told you I can do it. It's like the SEALs like, look, we're not here to show off. We're here to do the mission. So if you want to do the mission, great. But they're gonna really snuff out of you real quick, like your intentions. Like, why are you here? And so that brings me to the point of, a lot of times people are like, pat service members on the back, like, thank you so much for your service. It's like, man, I love doing this. But at the same time, I think it's so important to discern why you're going to show up to a certain vocation, whether that's, academics, music, being a doctor, lawyer, insurance salesman, et cetera, using your gifts, your talents for the glory of God. And I really felt like this is where I feel called, but I also feel like I have some gifts and talents to use in this arena. And I would also share with guys listening, like, those same gifts, everyone has their own gifts and talents from the Lord, and he's asking us to maximize them, not to bury them, but to turn 5 into 10 and 10 into 20 and use them within our own sphere of influence. So I think that's a huge takeaway that I'd like to just share there. At the end of the day, I guess there's still some mystique. I feel like there's a lot of open source stuff now in the SEALs, but at the end of the day, we don't drink ox blood for breakfast. Like, we put pants on. It's just average dudes, doing the job.
I want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, the Saintmaker, for sponsoring this excellent episode with Sam Blair.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but I really struggle sometimes to pull things together, stay organized, stay on track. And one thing that's really helpful with that is having clear goals and actionable, measurable goals, and actually working through them. So God is calling us to greatness. He doesn't want us to be mediocre in the spiritual life. We need to really strive for holiness, strive for greatness. That is our calling as Catholic men. And it can really help to have a resource to help keep you on track. And the Saintmaker is such a resource. It's a one-of-a-kind personal journal and planner in one that helps you reignite your faith, as well as professionally and personally helps keep you on track. So it's a great resource. It's backed by Catholic wisdom, but also by modern science and psychology to help you get the most out of your daily routine. And so it's a wonderful way of approaching things that helps you break things down, make them very simple and practical.
Yeah, and one thing I love about the Saintmaker is that it breaks things down. You have month goals, you have weekly goals, you have daily planned out items to make sure that you're growing both spiritually, physically, intellectually in your life. So there are already thousands of Catholics on the Saintmaker journey. We have been granted a free trial offer that will include free shipping for our members. So any Catholic Gentleman listeners can head on over to thesaintmaker.com/Catholic Gentleman. I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you're listening on podcast, it'll be in the show note there. If you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be in the show note there as well. Just click on that. Use the promo code Catholic Gentleman. So it's not the Catholic Gentleman. It's just Catholic Gentleman, and it's man, not men. So MAN at the end. Again, that's going to be in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for the individuals over at the Saintmaker for what they're doing to better the lives of men and women. Well, and one of the things that I keep on hearing, or being called is this idea of sacrifice, right? That you have to sacrifice so much to accomplish the level that you are at. And I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. So you traveled around the world and you got married, right? And so you're having kids and stuff. And so there's a sacrifice for a certain greater good. And I'd love to hear from you. What were some of the other desires of life or things that you had to sacrifice for this pursuit in excellence, right? Which is what we're talking about. We're talking about that challenge that we all secretly long for as a body, mind, and soul individual. And so you coming from such a unique position in life, I'd love to hear from you with your experience as an active, Navy SEAL and a Navy SEAL officer, kind of how that helped you in your growth, body, mind, and soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the sacrifice too, and I just share this, I guess, candidly, is a lot of this falls to, sure, the veterans themselves, there's a lot they sacrifice, but it's the spouses, it's the children on the back end too. Like, they're also sacrificing. And I really feel for the spouses and the children, because they didn't sign up for it. And that was something I started wrestling with a lot. Like, man, I'm gone a lot. I'm away from home a decent amount, not a significant amount of time. And I'm selfishly loving this profession. My wife and kids didn't sign up for this. And I want to unpack that a little bit. So one, when I signed up, I was single. My first deployment, I was single. That's a lot different than future deployments where I was married, and then future deployments married with children. Mm-hmm. That changes the dynamic. Plus, you're getting older. You're getting a little bit wiser on stuff. There's less bravado. There's more cerebral component to the job. And I'm not advocating that all wars need to be fought by single individuals, but for me, the decision was, hey, my primary vocation is a husband, is a father. And so I started making some moves to off-ramp from the military a couple years ago. And a lot of that had to do with the last deployment I was on, just married and I had young kids. I was like, man, this is totally different than it was when I first showed up to the scene. So that said, it took me a hot minute to make that decision. And I remember when my oldest was born, I put my paperwork in. And I said, hey, I'm done.
Yeah. And
I got a call, like, hey, Sam, we want to give you a platoon on the West Coast, SEAL Team 5. And my wife, this was like a huge point of contention. And selfishly, I'm not going to armchair quarterback it, but I made a unilateral decision. One of the few in my life, in married life, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I came home. I was like, hey, babe, I pulled my papers, I'm staying in. And oh, by the way, we're moving. And here's this lady like with a little baby. And then she's pregnant with our second. And we're moving across country from Virginia to San Diego. And that was, talk about sacrifice. That was all on my wife. She had the team on her back. And she was rightfully upset. She's like, what are you doing? Like, what kind of decision maker are you? So that stung. That said, in hindsight, I really feel like that was a great tour, and it was really necessary in a lot of ways to set up for the off ramp in the long game.
So a lot of sacrifices, both from your wife and family, but also, like the feeling kind of like, I love this, but right. I have responsibility to my family now, and just kind of feeling that tension. I just want to ask, this, I've known some people in the military who have a strong faith. But I also know that like sometimes some of the culture that just goes along with that can be kind of a challenge to faith sometimes. And I'm curious, like, how'd you handle that? Like, you had a strong Catholic foundation and you kind of came into the military with that. And I'm just wondering, like, were there challenges for you, or did you find a lot of support for your faith? And what was that like for you just kind of throughout your career?
Yeah. I definitely think faith was paramount, in my career, and continues to be paramount in my civilian career. But I do applaud the military. They still have a strong chaplain corps, which is great. So even overseas, there were some deployments where I was away from the sacraments for a couple months. But there was others where I had access to, which was phenomenal, So that was huge. Staying close to sacraments, even on deployments. What a gift. And then as far as the culture, you're right. I mean, there's definitely alignment with regards to the mission, with regards to camaraderie, teamship. So I was really close with a lot of guys that maybe didn't share my faith or share my outlook or maybe value systems completely. But there's enough common ground there where lifelong friends. That said, some of my dearest friends are from the teams because not only did we have all this alignment, but then we shared the faith on top of that. Like on just such good friends because of that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. So carrying with this, was your deployment when you went to these different places and you saw probably a lot of wickedness and a lot of, the depravity of mankind, I would assume. Were you ever challenged in your faith? Was your faith ever, on edge, or did you find that it only strengthened your faith? I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have regarding that, or how to stay diligent as a man in your pursuit of holiness, when the world seems to be falling apart and you in particular are going to fight some of those evils.
Yeah, I would say the latter. I think it only reinforced and strengthened my faith. But I think more than that, it also gave me a great appreciation for America and the fact that we're founded on laws, and that, laws are meant for the well-being of humans. Humans aren't made for laws. Like that whole thing, when you start looking at a breakdown of essentially de-civilization, you have a great appreciation for civilization. And a lot of, the monasteries, founded by St. Benedict that kind of helped keep civilization moving forward in a positive direction. I think two things on that, John. One, coming back from some of these deployments, I remember catching up with some buddies. One in particular, it was like a 4th of July. We had like a little beach party in Virginia, Virginia Beach. And there was, I think, a cop patrolling the beach looking for open bottles or something like that. And one of the spouses, one of my buddy's spouses, had some comments for the cop. And he's like, baby, they're good. They keep law, they keep order. They're good. Like, and he was like totally advocating based on what we had seen. He was like, this is good. Like, don't come down on this poor guy. Like he's policing the situation so that we can have a great time and enjoy the 4th of July. The other comment I think is, and this is more like what saddens me, is you start seeing where some of these policies that are currently like the socialism kind of at work and this wokeism here in America and in Western civilization more broadly, you see where some of these policies go. And you're just like, guys, like America right now is so strong that we're sending men and women from our borders to other borders to essentially police this area of the world. Like, get it together. Like, this is unsustainable, and it's only going to lead to pain and death. Like, we really got to get ahead of these policies. So I think that saddens me, seeing that, like having like first world view of like, oh man, like we're headed in the wrong direction. Like let's get a rudder correction. Coming back stateside, and I think the fight still continues. It looks different, but it's more of a social fight. And one, we have to stand in the truth. Rambling there. I don't know if that made any sense, but just trying to answer that question there.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And the appreciation for law and order and kind of the ugliness when that can break down. And just switching gears just a little bit, I'm curious too, like, undoubtedly learned a lot of lessons in your time about leadership and discipline and things like that, and a lot of the Navy SEALs kind of like when they come out the other side, it seems like there's a lot of like people looking to them for like, what did you learn? Like, so I guess I'm curious, like, what are some of your biggest takeaways from your experience, in this kind of elite group, and how have you brought that to, your faith, your family? Like, what does that look like? And yeah, what can, and I guess the last piece of that would be like, what can we learn from that as men striving for holiness, striving to love our families well, lead our families? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, Sam. I think there's a lot I could, share, but I would like to just maybe focus that question on just leadership more broadly, because I think it's one of these topics that I think would be helpful in today's age. I also think it's misunderstood. We hear the word leadership, and it's so squishy, and it's really not well defined or anchored. And I even remember instinctively thinking, I love leadership, but what is leadership? If someone asked me, I probably didn't have an answer when I was in my early 20s. And I remember my first professional development course in the teams, we had this meeting and the topic of leadership came up. And they're like, what is leadership? And everyone had answers. And people just, the instructor was writing different words down on the chalkboard. And ultimately, we arrived at vision, direction, inspiration. So, okay, great. I have a concept for leadership. And then fast forward, probably 2 years, I was in another professional development course, and topic of leadership came up again. Like, what is leadership? I know. Vision, direction, inspiration. They're like, no. It's like, I guess I don't know. So they ended up just fast forwarding, like, it's influence. Leadership is influence, and it's synonymous. So, like, I can actually get behind that. But as I pondered that a little bit, I was like, I don't know that I'm down with that definition either. Only because if that's the objective definition of leadership, that means Mao Zedong was a great leader. It means Hitler was a great leader. I'm like, well, okay, they have influence, so therefore they're good leaders. Like, no. And that's where I think as Christians, we have to make that distinction of like, hey, is this leadership for our own gain, or is this Christ-centered leadership? Are we helping individuals, whether it's our family, our company, our community, work towards virtue and pursue a life where we're thriving and actually aimed at the narrow road towards heaven? Or are we using this for our own gain? And I think that distinction is super important, because we all are called to holiness. We're also called to be leaders within certain sectors of our life. For the three of us, like we all are definitely like objectively called to be leaders within our own domestic church. Yeah. And so taking that concept, like, am I leading my family well? Am I serving my family well? Am I looking out for them? Am I putting their interests above my own or first? Or, am I being self-seeking? And that is something that maybe, like, that's something I want to continue to work on, and not only understand theoretically, but live out day to day in my life, as a businessman, but ultimately as a husband, as a father.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as we're coming up closer to the end here, I want to ask you, I guess, what would you tell men that are struggling to find kind of a path forward? So, maybe you liken it to when you're shifting now to a civilian life, you had so much rigor and so much order. There's a lot of guys that have never had that in life and are struggling to gain it themselves. We hear from them frequently, on this episode. So what are some, pearls of wisdom you would like to leave with these men that have maybe fallen off and are looking to get back on, or are struggling, are listening in? They hear you as a Navy SEAL officer. They're going to see that on the show here, and they're going to be intrigued and hope to gain something that you have learned to help them in their own pursuit and challenges in life. And I just love to give you an opportunity to speak to us men.
Yeah, well, thank you. I don't, I'll share maybe what's been helpful for me, and if it's helpful, great, and if not, feel free to jettison. But I think universally, I'm coming to this understanding that if we're going to pursue the path, the narrow road, which is hard, and you can get worn out, and like, oh man, this is exhausting. It is. However, Christ is like, tie in to the vine. We can't do anything without the Lord. Like, he's really clear on that. Like, you can do nothing without me. So for me, when I have those moments of exhaustion, I just encourage you to double down on your prayer life, because you will find refreshment. Like, the Lord's clear on that too. The other thing is stay close to the sacraments, particularly confession and the Eucharist. Sin dulls the will and the intellect. So I think whenever we're kind of getting into the muck and the mire, I would just encourage men to just reset, start over. It's a new day, like clean slate, and just keep pressing the fight forward. And then the Eucharist, like that's just food for the journey. That's fuel. And the other thing I would say is just to rest easy, knowing that holiness is the Lord's work. It's not ours. Like we can cooperate with the Lord on that. And he's just asking us to show up. So if you're just showing up and cooperating, he's going to do the work. Like, but you need to at least show up, like minimum. And so one of the things on a practical level, buddy shared this with me and I love it, is just waking up in the morning and just the first action of the day is just to kneel down, sign the cross, and just tell the Lord, like, I will serve. Like just real simple, like I will serve. And then like the day's yours, and then move forward.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, just to show up, I mean, day after day, that consistency, that discipline. And I guess that would be my last question too, is what would you say to someone who's really struggling with discipline? I'll just admit, like, that's one of those things that's very difficult for me. Like, unless I have somebody outside, like pushing me, like it's hard for me to hold myself accountable sometimes, where it's like, I know I should be doing this, and maybe I'll do great for like a week, and then I'll fall off the bandwagon. So what would you say to people who maybe struggle with discipline? Maybe it doesn't come as easily to their personality or whatever, but they also realize they need that structure and that order. Like, how did you develop that? And what would be some suggestions?
Yeah. It's a solid one. I think there's a solid question, and you hit on it too, Samuel. Like maybe it's not conducive with your personality, and I think there's a lot to that could probably be unpacked. You know, some personalities are just driven towards that. They're just checklist Charlies. Like that's just how they live and operate and move through the world. And I have, children that fall in line with that and maybe mirror me, and then I have other children that are just sanguine and just like, yeah, whatever. And you have to like constantly remind them, like, hey, please go take your clothes and put them in the dirty hamper. Like, okay. And it's like, no, literally go put your clothes in the dirty hamper, And so I get it, and both of those personalities are wonderful in their own right, and God created both those personalities. So I think part of that is just realizing, like, where do you fall in line? And then, okay, give yourself a little bit of some breathing room. Like you're not better or you're just different, So I think one of those things, just because one person's more disciplined than the other doesn't mean they're better or on a faster track. I think it's just a matter of nuance. And so I would say, one, rest easy. Two, just identify what is it that you do need and then solve for that. Because individuals that have that checklist Charlie life, they also struggle with maybe being more flexible, being more open to others, loving. I mean, there's all sorts of pros and cons, So I don't think it's fair to just bin someone who's disciplined as like, oh, they're on the path to Saint.
Got it.
I would just, I think it's just understanding who you are and what the Lord's calling you to do, and using those gifts, those talents, and then solving for those friction points.
That's not what I expected to hear, but that's like really refreshing. And so thank you for that. And next time my wife gets annoyed with me for not taking out the trash, I'll say, Sam the Navy SEAL said.
Yeah.
My personality.
Yeah. So. She'll be all about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, really, I do appreciate that. And, like you can get in this mindset where you kind of beat up on yourself. Like, I should be one of those people that lives by the checklist. I should be one of those guys that's up at 4:30 of it, like doing his routine but yeah, I appreciate that the nuanced answer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your life as a civilian now with the Frassati Company. We just released an episode, 12 Manliest Saints, and Blessed Giorgio Frassati was one of them. And so love to hear what you're doing now and how men can learn more about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. So the Frassati Company is basically, we got the band together from the Naval Academy. My last tour, I was teaching leadership and ethics there, and just surrounded by a lot of powerhouse individuals that were well-formed Catholic men and women there. And, everyone kind of had this either a PhD in academics or experience, whether it's a fighter pilot, in my case, SEAL officer, ship drivers, kind of had the whole team there. So it's a cross-functional team to help organizations and executives thrive. And interested in looking that up, got a great team, happy to help there. And I guess this is also fresh out the press. We're looking to turn that into a nonprofit, and really, currently we're working with startups, mid-level companies, Fortune 500 companies, which is great. It's a pretty wide gambit, but we're really kind of focusing it now towards the Catholic executives, Catholic universities, Catholic companies, Catholic nonprofits. So really trying to kind of play in that sector to serve as a mission arm of the church.
That's
to
excellent.
help understand leadership. Yeah.
So dive just a little bit in. So how do you help these executives? Are you what are some of the tenets or the rules that you're using to help them thrive?
Yeah. So there's 3 pillars. I just gave you 4, but there's 3 pillars.
Yeah.
So executive coaching.
Okay.
So that's just one-on-one coaching, and unlike maybe consulting, where it comes in like, hey, here's an answer, like move forward with it. Or counseling them, just focus on the past. Coaching is just focused on like, hey, what's your friction point now, and how can we move you forward to thrive? And that's really wonderful work. And again, done from a Catholic lens, not from this woke kind of mentality, which is also refreshing. And then consulting, we'll work with teams. So that's where we'll give the teams kind of the battery of assessments. We'll figure out how they communicate, where they're going, what they do, all that stuff, and move them forward. And that can be anywhere from a 90-minute session to like a year-long engagement. Okay. And then adventures. So taking companies and adventures, or companies on adventures. So really getting the boardroom or the executive staff or mid-level managers out and working together, which has the potential to be very impactful. We also do keynote speaking and some other topics there. But those are kind of the 3 big pillars.
Excellent.
To help organizations.
Oh, I appreciate you doing that. And we're praying that that has a lot of success and hopefully a lot of personal fulfillment in being able to serve the church in that manner.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just anything else you want to leave us with? This has been a wonderful conversation.
I just want to thank you guys and thank the listeners, and appreciate what you guys are doing, and definitely keeping you guys in my prayers. Keep up the good work.
That's awesome. So as we come to the end here, and we like to end every episode,
be a man, be a saint.